Hello guys, recently I released a video, a demo project about tenants and asset management. And I compiled it into a 10-minute short video with explaining some parts of the code, but initially the plan was that it would be a full course of me live coding the whole project. So I've shot 3 videos of that and realized it would be just too long. So I stopped shooting the course and instead shot this 10-minute video. But one of the followers in YouTube comments suggests, I'd really like to see those 3 videos, it still would be useful, and 2 likes for that comment. So I thought, okay, so in this video you will see around 40 minutes of me live coding a simple tenant management system. And there is a GitHub repository public with 3 commits. First commit is creating new Laravel project and seeding the administrator user to log in. And I use Laravel UI for the auth scaffolding. Then second lesson would be managing the tenants. So it's basically a CRUD, add a tenant user, edit and delete, or soft delete. And then third lesson is the invitation of that tenant user. So sending emails, confirmation of the email, setting the password, and actually activate the user. So this all is upcoming in the 40 minutes video after I finish talking here, and the link to the repository is in the description of this video. Enjoy! So let's begin our project, and the first goal in the first lesson is to generate new Laravel project, generate some design with Laravel UI. I will choose all the way Laravel UI for the design, and then seed administrator user, log in with that user, and create some menu item which will be empty for now. And we will also use the seeders for roles. In our system we will have 3 roles: administrator, company, and simple user. Let's begin from Laravel, new project. Project will be a folder. In that folder, Laravel will download the project and run Composer install and everything. Let's wait for a few minutes. Okay, we have a new project, cd project, and let's try it in browser. I have a domain prepared, project.test, and it's a default Laravel 8 landing page. Now let's generate administrator user with role administrator. First, we need to create a model called role, PHP artisan make model role -m for migration and also s for seeder. Everything created successfully. Now let's open PHP Storm. So we have the migration for roles table, and all we need is one field, table string name, so role name. And also we should make it fillable in app models role fillable name. And now let's seed 3 roles. So we go database seeders, role seeder, and let's just run 3 sentences. Role create name administrator, and then we duplicate command D in my PHP Storm, company, and user. Now let's add that seeder into database seeder for the whole project. We add this call role seeder class. Okay, so we will seed the roles, and now let's seed one more user, which will be administrator user. Let's do file save as here in role seeder, admin user seeder, for example. Let's rename the class, and in here user create, and what will be the parameters? Name administrator, email, let it be admin.com, password should be encrypted by bcrypt method, for example secret. And also we need a role for that user. So for now, let's add role ID field, which will be equal to 1, and 1 is our role for the administrator. So we will seed the admin user seeder. We don't need role anymore here. And we will add admin user seeder into database seeder here. Duplicate admin user seeder. And now we need to create that role ID field. So we go PHP artisan make migration, add role ID to users table. Okay. and we go table foreign ID. This is a syntax that appeared in Laravel 7. So role ID constraint. This means that it will create role ID field and also foreign key to the database table roles. And then we need to open user model and make that fillable as well. So user model, which comes from Laravel by default, role ID as another field. And in the database header, let's remove this line, and now let's remigrate and reseed all the database. So PHP artisan migrate fresh -- seed. Successful. Let's check the database. Refresh the tables, users, content, and we have our administrator user. Final step in this lesson, let's install Laravel UI and try to log in with that user. So composer require Laravel UI. If we open Laravel UI documentation, we will generate a simple bootstrap without Vue or React, this design with scaffolding with auth. Okay, so we copy this and paste into our terminal. Now we need to run npm install and npm run dev, and we should be ready. Paste, and let's wait for a minute. Okay, build successful. Let's refresh our page, and we should see login and register here. And if we click login, we should be successfully logged in with admin.com and secret. Let's try, and we are in. So this was our goal for this lesson, to log in as administrator and seed that administrator as a user, so we wouldn't need to create that manually every time. In the next lesson, we will work on managing the tenants, so role ID number 2, companies. In this lesson, let's create a management system for role number 2 for tenants or companies. Tenants and companies will be the same throughout all this project. And they are also users. So user will just have role ID 2 and another database field called domain. So every tenant will be created with their own domain or subdomain. So let's create that field. PHP artisan make migration, add domain to users table. Okay, table string domain, and also nullable, because only those types of user will have that domain, otherwise it will be null for everyone else. And in the user we need to make that fillable domain. Now let's create a menu item here for administrator to manage tenants. So we go to our app blade PHP, in the layouts, scroll down to the navigation bar, and here we have from Laravel UI empty placeholder for any menu items that you may need. So let's add a menu item. It should be class nav item, and then we have with class nav link tenants, and the route will be route tenants index. For now it doesn't exist. Let's create that. In the routes web we will have route resource tenants tenant controller, and let's generate that controller. PHP artisan make controller tenant controller -- resource. Okay, so tenant controller is ready, index is ready, and for now let's return just some text, success. And let's refresh our page. Refresh, we have tenants here. If we click, tenant controller does not exist. Probably we need to change that to, instead of tenant controller, we need to have tenant controller class, like this. The logic has changed in Laravel 8. Yep, that was exactly the change. So now we have the page, and instead of returning success, let's return the view tenants index. And the tenants will be user where role ID equals 2 get all tenants, and then we'll pass that to the index like this. And in the index, tenants index, it doesn't exist yet, so let's take the default Laravel UI resources views home blade, and let's do file save as resources views tenants index blade, and let's delete everything here. So tenants card body, and in here we will have a table. So table bootstrap class table, then head of the table, and columns name, email, domain, and then actions. Now we have table body, and for each of the tenants as tenant, and for each like this, auto format with PHP Storm, and then each tenant is a line with tenant name, and duplicate, email, domain, and then we will have some actions, but we will get to them later. And also what I like to use is, instead of for each, use for else. So instead of adding if tenants count or something and then empty line, I do for else like this, then and for else, and then there's empty. So empty, and inside of that empty I can put the HTML for the condition of empty tenants. So 0 tenants, and I have this empty. So it will show with call span for no tenants. Let's reformat again, and let's refresh the page. Home, tenants, and there we go. We have a table, empty table with non-tenants yet. Let's create one. Above the table, let's create a button or link to route tenants create with class button primary, for example, add new tenant, break. Let's test how it looks. Refresh. Yeah, we have add new tenant. Actually, one more new line is required. Add new tenant. For now, it doesn't show anything because that method is empty. So tenant controller create return view tenants create. So we need to create a form. Let's open tenants index, file save as, tenants create. And inside of that create, we need add new tenant, and in card body it will be a form. So instead of that table, we will have a form, action route tenants store. Then we need CSRF hidden input field for the security. And now let's copy some stuff from other page, which is auth login blade. It has everything that we need, form group row with all the validation here. So this will be one field. Okay, so we have the field for the email exactly as it should be from the registration form. Now let's copy, and above the email we should have a name field. So name field, label for name. I will quickly do the editing. Okay, so we have the name field ready, and let's copy and paste it into below space for the domain, the third field. And also I will quickly do the editing. Okay, and final thing, what we need to do is a submit button. We take it from login blade, just copy and paste another block. We don't need this, but we do need the button submit, save tenant. Okay, let's refresh the page. And we have this add new tenant form. So tenants, add new tenant, and we have the form. Now let's take care of the submit. Let's make a validation request. PHP artisan make request store tenant request. And what will be the rule for our request? So store tenant request, authorize will be true by default. We will take care of the roles and permissions in later videos, but for the rules for validation we have name required, email and also required, and also unique, should be unique in users, domain is also required and unique in users. So we cannot assign the same domain to another tenant. And in our store method in tenants controller, instead of request we do store tenant request, then we create that user, create request validated. Validated, it's not request all, it's only the request variables that will come after validation, so all of those three. It's kind of a security measure that no one would actually pass anything malicious. So request validated, and also we need to add role ID. Role ID will be 2 in this case. And not only that, we also need the password. And password for now, let it be something like this, secret, because we will send the email to the tenant and they will create the password themselves. And the result of that will be return, redirect to the route of tenants index. Let's try it out. Refresh the page, fill in the form with fake filler Chrome extension, save tenant, and for some reason we don't have any tenants. Let's check the database. Users, nothing. The reason is, I've noticed only later, in the URL we have the token, the name and all of that, so we didn't pass the method post here. Create blade, at the very top in the form we need to add method post. I intentionally won't edit that out because you will see the actual errors, how to debug them and how to fix them. So now we fill that in, we save the tenant, unknown column domain, we didn't migrate, PHP artisan migrate. Now refresh, and now we see the new tenant with name, email and domain. Okay, now we need to continue managing the tenants with edit and delete actions, so to have full CRUD. So let's add edit button here in the list. So in the index blade we add in this empty column link to route tenants edit, and parameter should be tenant ID. That tenant edit comes from route resource as edit method. So we have edit here. Let's add a class. So class button small and button info, for example. Edit, refresh the page, and we have the edit button. For now it doesn't do anything. Let's fill in the edit method. In the controller, let's close everything else. We need to add actually show. We won't have the show here. We will have edit. So return view tenants edit compact tenant. And that tenant may come from the find inside of that method, or we can use so-called route model bindings. So user will be the class name and object variable will be tenant, and that tenant automatically goes here. And let's fix the dog block as well. So user tenant, and we have opened create blade for tenants, and we do file save as edit blade, and that edit will change edit tenant. The action will be tenants update, method post, but then we need to add method put, and then in tenants update there should be also a variable tenant ID, and then in the values of all the fields there should be, instead of all, there should be tenant name, tenant email and tenant domain. Like this, save tenant, everything else should be fine. Let's refresh the page. And there we go. We have edit tenant form with 3 fields filled in and with save tenant leading to the update method. Let's fill in the update method. So in the controller, it should be pretty similar to store, and we may reuse the same form request. It will be identical actually. In the store or in the update, these rules should be identical. Let's try it out. So update, instead of request, we do store tenant request. And instead of ID, we will do also route model binding, so user tenant. And let's try, actually let's change that as well. Tenant update request validated, and return redirect to route tenants index. That's it. Let's try it out. I'm not sure if it works, but let's see. So let's add ... save tenant, and we have a problem. Validation rules, after all, they cannot be the same because email and domain has already been taken by the same record. So we need to change the update rules to exclude the ID that is currently being edited. So we just go store tenant request, save as update tenant request, like this. Rename the file class update tenant request, and we will change that email to, we need to change that to add a custom rule. So instead of that being a string, we will have an array of rules. First rule will be email, next rule will be required, and then instead of unique users, we will have rule unique table users ignore, and we pass this tenant as in full tenant object, which comes from here, from tenant. And behind the scenes, I've changed in the update tenant request, and in store we will have store tenant request. And let's finish it up with a domain, so also array required, and instead of unique users, we will have, copy this line, paste here, rule unique users, ignore this tenant. So same thing. Let's try it out. Let's refresh the page, change something, and we have successfully edited. Now let's add the delete, and for that we will add soft deletes. I like personally to use soft deletes everywhere, just in case in all models. So let's add soft deletes, PHP artisan make migration, add soft deletes to users table. So add soft deletes, just table soft deletes. And in the model of user, we need to add them soft deletes. And they probably should be added here automatically by PHP Storm. Yes, correct. And now in the index blade of tenants, let's add the form to delete. So form action route tenants. I don't remember if it's delete or destroy. Let's add destroy. Method post. In here we have CSRF, and also method delete, and submit button type submit, class button danger, delete, actually button small danger. And also we need to add on click the confirmation, so let's just add it as a simple JavaScript. So on click, return confirm, are you sure? Like this. Refresh the page, and of course we forgot to migrate, PHP artisan migrate. Okay, refresh the page now. Missing parameters, of course, destroy what? So it should be tenant ID, like this. And we have the button. Let's make it in the same line. So in the form, let's have some styling. It's just inline style, so style display in line block from what I remember, like this. Refresh, and we have it in the same line. Now if we delete and cancel, nothing will happen, but if we delete and confirm, then it will load the destroy method by controller here, this one. We do user here, so also route model binding tenant, and then we do tenant delete and return redirect route tenants index. If the tenant is not found, then it will throw for page. Let's refresh, continue, and as you can see, no tenants. So again, add new tenant, fake filler, save tenant. Let's add one more, form save tenant. Let's edit something, save tenant, and let's delete. Okay, one should be remained. So now we have full CRUDs for tenant. And next should be the invitation for the tenant. So to set the password, they would receive an email and then confirm their username. In this lesson, let's send email invitation to tenants, but first there are a few cleanup things I've noticed from a previous lesson. Not sure if you've noticed, but menu item tenants is accessible not only by admin, but for anyone. So I'm not logged in currently, but I still see the tenant and I can manage the tenants. So let's fix that by doing route group. So in this route resource, that route resource should have a middleware of auth. But instead of doing that, let's start creating route group, which would be protected by middleware. So route group. The first parameter is array of various parameters for route group, and we will have middleware auth, and then second is a callback function like this, and then we can get that route resource for tenants inside of that auth. And now if we refresh the page, I should be redirected to login, as you can see, and then if I'm logged in as admin with secret, add new tenant is accessible to me. And not only that, we need to hide the tenant's menu item. So if I click login, this should not be visible, right? So we go to app blade and we will have auth here. Auth and auth, like this. So this menu item and maybe more will be accessible only for logged in users. Refresh the page and this is not visible anymore. And another thing I wanted to fix is that domain name should not contain spaces. So imagine domain or subdomain in our case, so something.project.test, that something should be only alphanumeric. And let's add that to the validation errors. So store tenant to validation rules, domain required. I think it's alphanum, like this. No, actually I've checked the documentation, it's underscore alphanum, like this one. So in here and then in update tenant request, same thing, required domain alpha num. And now let's try to add the incorrect domain. So we fake filler, save tenant, and the domain may contain only letters and numbers, so no spaces. Okay, so those two fixes, and now let's send the email invitation to tenants. So we will create a notification class to invite the tenants. So PHP artisan make notification tenant invite notification, like this. And let's open it up. Notifications, tenant invite notification. Default email notification, return mail. To mail, line the introduction to the notification. Instead of that, let's do you have been invited as a tenant, and then the action will be accept invitation. And URL will be not the core URL, it will be a URL specifically for that notification. And we will have it as a private variable here inside of the notification. So private URL, and we will pass that in the constructor, so URL, and then we assign that to private property, so this URL will be equal URL, and we will pass that when creating the notification, and then we pass that here as URL here, this URL. And now we call that notification in tenant controller when we create the tenant. In store, we create the user, and we need the result of that call. Let's actually make it 2 lines. And then we need to notify that user. So user notify new tenant invite notification, and the parameter will be URL. And for that URL, let's use a Laravel function called signed routes. So there's a function inside of URL signed route name invitation, for example, and parameters, let it be user object as a parameter, like this. To test the sending of emails, I will use a service called MailTrap. I use it for all email testing, and I need to copy username and password to my .env file. In the section of mail, username and password from here. MailTrap is, by the way, configured by default from default Laravel, and also we need to specify from address, otherwise it wouldn't work. Finally, to make it all work, in Tenant controller we created a signed route for invitation, and we need to create that route in routes web. So we go to routes web, and it will be a public route get invitation / user, and we will use the same Tenant controller, just another method invitation, and we will assign a name invitation. In fact, the syntax is a bit different. It should be an array. I'm still getting used to Laravel 8 new syntax of routes. So controller class and method name, and now let's try to send an email. We open the form, fill it in with fake filler. Let's make the domain something in one word. We save the tenant, and let's see if the email has been sent. The tenant created successfully. If we look at the mail trap, we have a new email. Hello, you have been invited as a tenant, accept invitation. And here's the link that we have just created. So that signed route is invitation / user ID, and then you have the signature. So the signature for making sure that that URL is unique. And now we will create that route and controller, check that signature, and log in as that tenant. So we specified that inside of that controller we will create invitation method. Let's do exactly that. So function invitation, and the parameter will be user. We will use route model binding, and then we need to check the request for signed URL, and if the signed URL is incorrect, we will abort with 401, which means unauthenticated. So if request, like this, we don't need this one, and there's a method has valid signature. So if not has valid signature, or if the password is already set, then we will abort 401. So user password not equals secret. Remember, we're storing secret as the first password by default. So if any of those conditions are true, then we abort with 401. It will just show error page with 401 code. Otherwise, if everything is good with request signature, we log in with that user. So log in with user and redirect to home. Return, redirect to home. Route home, like this. And let's try it out. Let's log out as administrator, and let's click the link in the email, accept the invitation. And as you can see, we're automatically logged in as that user and redirected back to home. So basically we accepted the invitation. But now we need to add one more step. That tenant needs to set their own password, and until they do that, we will redirect back to the setting password page. So we will create a middleware of checking the password, and if the password is secret, so while the password is secret, then it keeps redirecting to set your password page. So first let's create that password setting page, and then we will protect that by middleware. So we generate the controller, artisan make controller set password controller, and inside of that we will have two methods. So set password controller, we'll have a method create for the form, and it will return view auth set password, for example. And let's open something from resources view auth, log in, and let's do file save as, and do set password blade. Set password blade, and we change this to set password or set your password, and the form will be to action set password store, so store the password, and then we need only one field. Actually, let's copy from register. There are two fields for password and password confirmation, so we need those exactly as they are without any changes, so we copy from there and paste here. So password like this, and instead of login, save password like this. We don't need this route, and it should be good. Now in routes web, we create that route get inside of the auth middleware because I'm already logged in to set my password. So route get set password without any user, and we will have set password controller create name set password. Let's try it out. The URL set password instead of home, and of course we haven't defined set password store, so let's define that. Duplicate the line and then post to set password. We'll fire set password controller class store method, and let's call it set password store. Okay, and now we have that form. Now let's set that in store. So public function store request as a parameter, and we update the password. So auth user update password equals bcrypt of request password, and then we redirect back. So return redirect route home with message password set successfully, like this. Let's make it 2-line, and now in our route home, in the home blade, we will add one more line. Actually, we will use the same session status, so we don't need any message. So status will be visible and show here in class alert of Bootstrap. So let's try it out. Let's set the password to something. We save the password, and password set successfully. But of course we need to validate that password, right? So if we come back to set password, the request should be not just request. In here it should be specific store password request. So let's create that. PHP artisan make request store password request, like this. Store password request, and what should be the rules? The only field is password, and it needs to be set, so minimum, for example, 6 characters, string, and it also needs to be confirmed. So there should be another field, password underscore confirmed, or password underscore confirmation, I think it's called. Let's double check. Name password confirmation. So it should be identical values between password and password confirmation. So let's use our store password request now. Instead of just request, store password request. And now if we enter something invalid, in here, for example, too short password, and of course I forgot to set not just the rules, but the authorized should be true. And now if we enter something invalid, in this form, it should throw some validation error. So password confirmation does not match. So now let's try again, and we save the password. And final thing, let's add a middleware to redirect to the set password page until it's actually set. So we create a new middleware, PHP artisan make middleware is password set middleware, like this. And then inside of that is password set middleware. We check if the user is logged in, so if auth check, but the password is auth password equals secret, and there's no password being passed to the request, so not set request password. Then we redirect, return, redirect, route, set password. which means on all the pages until the password is not secret, we will continuously redirect to set password. Then we need to register that middleware in the kernel, app http kernel php. We need to assign some kind of name, and we will assign that middleware to all the pages in web group. So on every page it will be checking is password set middleware class. Let's try it out. Let's refresh the home, and it won't redirect anywhere. But now let's change that password to secret directly in the database like this. And now if we launch home, we should be redirected to set password, which was successful, but it redirected too many times. So probably we need to set another condition. So if request is not set password, so the URL is not set password, like this. Then we redirect back, refresh. Yeah, we had set password, but if we go to tenants, we are redirected back again. And if we choose to go to home, then we're still redirected back until we set the password. Let's do that. Set the password and save. And now we are in home. We access tenants or whatever menu item we want. So now we officially have set our password as a tenant, and we are logged in as a verified user.